Kia ora and good morning. Welcome to Economic Growth Committee this morning for the 25th of October. I'd like to ask the Deputy Mayor to open this morning.
Tēnā koe, Madam Chair, o te rā tēnā tātou, and to our guests as well, ngā mihi. Tū tawa mai I runga, tū tawa mai I raro, tū tawa mai I roto, tū tawa mai I waho. Kia tau ai te Māori tū, te Māori ora, ki te katoa, haumi e, hui e, tāe ki e. Tēnā koutou. Kia ora, Madam Chair.
Kia ora, thank you. First off, we'll call for I'll explain that the meeting has been recorded and will be live streamed. And we'll also explain the health and safety procedures. So if we have an emergency in the chamber, we will follow our administrators out and they will take us to the emergency points outside the council. The second thing I'd like to say that we are being live streamed, but we don't have anybody that's online today, so we don't have to worry about that. But if we have anybody that is watching, well, that's great. But we don't have any councillors that are online today. I do want to call for apologies. First off, I've got Councillor Fitzgerald and Councillor Dennison. I look to move those two apologies, seconded by Councillor Wood. I'd like to vote on that, thank you. That is passed, 14 votes for. Secondly, I'd like to call for any notification of additional items. I haven't heard of any additional items. No? Okay. Any declarations of interest on this agenda today? No? Moving through to public comment. I've got no public comment. Okay, we'll first off move to our first presentation today, which is Palmy Bid. So we'll ask, this is item number 5 on page 7. We've got Rob Campbell and Matthew Jeans. Now you've got 10 minutes. I know Rob's been to the chamber before, so we'll give you, open you up and get you going. You just push that button in front, Rob.
That one? How's that?
Yep, 10 minutes, and then we can ask you questions in that 10 minutes.
This is all quite new.
So away you go. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, and Madam Chair, thanks for the opportunity to speak again. This is the first time we've been able to get in front of you this year, and we're looking forward to it. Just, are we going here? Let's have a look. Thank you. The purpose of the presentation today is just to sort of give you an update of where we have been in the last sort of 8 or 9 months. And in particular, we want to focus on what we think we've done well in the year, but also give you a chance to understand our 5-year success measures, which were signed off at our AGM last November. We had a chance to present them to you, and we think they're important. So just to recap, firstly, BID, the membership organisation, funded by a targeted rate. We represent roughly 1,200 business and property owners in the city centre. It's a vehicle, we believe, to translate community aspirations into action, and quite importantly, it's a vehicle that's a conduit for communication between council and the community. We were accepted by the community in December 2020. So our key deliverables are to advocate for business interests within the BID and provide representation. We will have a focus to grow through collaboration, marketing, events and public relations. And we have a key focus on support and safety of the people who visit and work in our community and to make their days and nights as safe as we possibly can. Thank you. Can we click on? Oh. Go back. So in terms of In terms of 5-year planning, in terms of advocacy, we want full engagement in the annual planning and long-term planning processes that Council undertakes. We want alignment with Council 80% of the time. We're not sort of naive enough to suggest that we can get 100% agreement with the objectives of the community. We want to represent enough sensible solutions that Council agree with us 80% of the time. Importantly, we want to go back to our community, and this is a theme you'll see in our planning. We want to go back to the community each year and have a 75% positive perception, satisfaction with the work that we're doing in the previous year. On the advocacy front, we have a focus on consumer spending exceeding the national average over the next 5 years. We want the number of electronic transactions exceeding the national average over the next 5 years. That's within the bid boundary. We want to increase foot traffic in the city centre. There's been a period of a long decline of people coming into the city centre. We want to reverse that trend. We want to increase the number of occupants, that's businesses operating in the city. And we want to improve vacancy rates, both of those numbers by 2% on an annual basis. Again, we want to go back to our community and be able to demonstrate 75% acceptance or satisfaction with the work we're doing over the year. In terms of support and safety, we want to see incidents of observed crime decreasing. In terms of connecting our community, email communications, we want to make sure that more than 50% of our community are opening those and reading them. Facebook remains our key platform in terms of connecting our community and reaching out to them. We want to make sure that our Facebook numbers are healthy. Again, our annual survey, we want to demonstrate 75% satisfaction in both these measures. Again, we're very conscious that we live and die by the support of our community, and so these survey results are pretty crucial to us. I'll pass over to Matthew to talk about what we've done. We think we've done quite well this year.
Morning, everyone. There's been some key points, mainly across advocacy and Safe City, and a whole lot of project work from BID this year so far, and particularly in the event space as well. We put out a car parking survey in April, which has been shared with the transport team, just to measure the response on the proposed changes in car parking technology and parking times. There was a good response to that. We've been advocating around the Princes Street permit holders parking across May and June, and we're now in discussions around consultancy with the speed management plan, which has resulted in some drop-in sessions and us supporting the council to promote those sessions. We've also assisted discussion, and there will be more of it with the indicative business case around the city centre bus terminal as we move forward, which will be a 1 to 2 year process. And we're also now in the discussion around advocacy for consultation around the parking framework, with workshops for the business community to come in due course. We're just working through that with the transport and parking team. Safe City, we've raised our voice and built a bit of a process relationship, I believe, on the Safety Advisory Board. There's some good, clear, open communication there, and that's resulted in building positive and healthy relationships, not just across the board, but with other organisations, the community services team at council, and also police as well. We've had a good representative voice around a number of matters. We lent a bit of voice to obviously getting police support through the Safety Advisory Board for a community services constable who's assisted in bringing down youth crime in the city centre. The retailers are breathing and smiling, and things have evened out quite a bit. We've also commenced discussion around the situation of homelessness and rough sleeping around the city centre, and now there's a steering group getting set up through the SAB to look at developing a city plan moving forward and what the process is as well. We've also delivered some situational awareness training in partnership with council to retailers in April, and there was some positive media coverage recently with the visit from the police minister from Labour. We've done a lot in terms of promoting and supporting businesses. We've supported 3 businesses to launch this year, and we'll continue to do that as we move forward. And we've done a lot in the event space as well. We've created some key events in the city, which has basically brought visitors and the community into the city centre and stimulated spend to the businesses around the city centre. So that's had positive outcomes. Out of that, we've developed an events calendar, which we're building on. And we've got our key annual event, Missoula Day, coming up on the 25th of November. We expect to see around 5,000 visitors for that. We've actually started this week to support that with a shopper promo to stimulate spend up until Christmas or before Christmas, with win a trip for 2 to Missoula. So that goes out this week. A lot of retailers are really happy to see that because it's going to stimulate things. It's low effort from their perspective. Moving forward, we've developed a new website. It is live now, softly, and in the next 2 weeks we're doing an official launch on it. We've put in a city centre events calendar. It's something that's been long talked about in the city but never achieved. And we're working with other agencies to bolster that. It's great for the retailers and the businesses because they become aware of what's happening in the city. It allows them to become involved, and also good for the community to see what's happening in the city centre as well.
Matthew, to interrupt, you've got a minute left.
Okay.
This is to include questions, so just to
Okay.
let you know.
To tail off, we've also developed a comms strategy and plan and promotional calendar as well.
Like councillors to ask you some questions?
Yes, please.
We'll finish and ask the questions.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got some councillors. I'll go to, first off, councillor Bowen.
Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair, for that. Thank you both for coming in today. Just a couple of questions. How did you come to a figure of 80% alignment with council? How is that the magic number?
It's a goal. We want to present solutions that will align with council's strategies at 80% of the time. So it's a goal on ourselves. We want to be sensible enough and pragmatic enough to present solutions that work 80% of the time.
Okay, thank you. In your deliverables, there was a consistent theme of annual survey, 75% satisfaction. Do you have a goal for participants in the annual survey? What's that 75% of?
Well, it's 70% of respondents. We'll aim to get as much participation as possible, but obviously that's something that's difficult to predict. If we get very low participation, then that'll be a red flag for us as well.
So you have a goal of 50% open emails. So would it be a sensible goal to say 50% response to the survey?
We haven't set a goal in terms of 50%. If I reflect on the original setup of the bid, we had about a 30% responding rate. If we achieved that to the surveys, I'd be satisfied. If we're much less than that, I'd be dissatisfied. 50% might be a stretch target, but we'll see how we go.
And would you be reporting on that response rate?
Correct, yes.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks, Rob and Matthew. Just interested in your presentation, and in particular, I guess, didn't see or hear much in there around city centre living, and just wondered kind of if city centre living is kind of coming into your planning and what kind of goals and activities you might be looking at there.
Yeah, look, a great point, and it was actually on the last slide, which we ran out of time to present. Key focus going forward is absolutely what plans we have for increasing city centre living. Personally, I'd like another 1,000 to 2,000 to 3,000 people living in the city centre, and I think we tie that in with the strategy that we have on earthquake strengthening. And I think there's a body of work to do there, absolutely, which we'd like to engage the council with. To date this year, there's been very little engagement on that, although we have put out some feelers about who we talk to.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thank you both, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Just one question from me around the Safety City Advisory Board. You said you worked alongside them. What kind of work do you do, that they do, that's quite considerably different? You do, that's different, that you work, do you work together to have the right outcome, but what's different that they do and that you do? I don't know if you understand my question, but I'm just trying to say, they have a purpose and you have a purpose. I just want to know, how can we see what's different from what they do to what you do in terms of safety for the city?
I think the Safety Advisory Board represents the region. Our focus is really what's happening within the city centre. In addition to that, we do run the Safe City Host program, which sort of, as you're aware, has a presence in the city in the evening in certain times. So we're about sort of building representation for the city centre on that vehicle as part of a regional-wide approach to safety.
Do you feel that people get muddled up about what people do in roles in terms of safety?
No, I don't. I think there's a collaborative approach at the the SAB. We certainly are pretty focused on what our area is and representing our community. I don't know that I see too much sort of misunderstanding necessarily.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Rob. Thank you very much, Matthew.
Apologies for the time overrun.
Yeah, thank you. You do a great job with the Palmy bid, and we're really pleased to have you on board, so thank you very much. So I'd like to move this presentation, seconded by Councillor Bowen. Is there any comment? Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the bid for coming in to present. And a personal thanks for the time you've taken to walk me through your planning process for the work that you've got on. Some really good early successes, and I'm personally delighted to see that finally somebody's managed to crack the calendar events nut. We'll wait and see how that one goes. We're still in very early stages, and I suppose my concern continues to be the concern that we started with about that low engagement from your community of interest, those 1,200 businesses. I'd really like to see a more engaged community around the bid. Those are your audience, and I'm interested to see their feedback coming through strongly, their engagement showing up in that survey that you're talking about. And I'm particularly keen also to see that return on investment on your events model that you're talking about there as well. I think there are things that we'll learn as we go, and that's a good thing, but we'll only get that learning if we're prepared to ask the hard questions. So thank you for coming in and speaking to us today. Thank you to the wider team for the work that you do. I think we've made a good start. Thank you.
Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks, Matthew and Rob. Look, just to, I guess, help frame your question, Madam Chair, is that the bid is now a full member of the Safety Advisory Board, and their involvement really is around collaboration and problem solving for a safer city. And I guess the vision really is around sort of ensuring that we've got collective impact and that we actually bring all parties into a process which is around problem solving for the safe city. So that really is just clarifying that and making sure that we're all clear on it. Thank you, and thanks Rob and Matthew.
Thank you for that, Councillor. We'll now look to vote. Thank you. That's passed, 14 votes for and none against. We'll now look to the next presentation, which is from Nick from the factory. Thanks, Nick. You've seen how it works. So there's 10 minutes there. Remember about the questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Great. Thanks so much for having me here today. It's been a while since we've sat at this table and talked a little bit about the factory. So I thought what I'd do is there's quite a few new councillors here and team from Palmerston City Council, so I wanted to give you an idea about what the factory does. So I'm sure some of you have already had exposure to the factory and have some different ideas about what we've done in the past and what we do. But what I wanted to do today was to introduce you to the Factory 2.0, a way to talk about the factory and understand what we do moving forward. Over the last 18 months, we've had a series of changes in our business. We've had some significant funding changes. We've had restructure, leadership, but ultimately this has taken us on a better path and course to promote economic growth, economic development within the Manawatu. So you can think about the factory as the startup incubator that backs Bold. That's what we do. We're a high-performance incubator for entrepreneurs that are creating high-growth startups of tomorrow. To date, some of our successes sit on this board here. We've worked with over 5,000 startups and entrepreneurs. We've also helped to raise over $60 million in angel and venture capital funding for these companies. But you might be thinking, what is a startup? Well, I really want to make the point that it's different to a SME. It's different to a traditional business. These are innovative, technology-driven companies that have aspirations for growth. And so the key element with them is that they're technology-driven and they're scalable. They're not defined as a side hustle, micro business, or SME. Some of the local examples in Manawatu are Biolumic, which has 40 staff, started by one founder from Massey University. Company's valued at about $80 million right now, and we've helped to raise significant funding for this business to keep it here and home in Manawatu. Some of the other companies are spin-outs from the CRIs, leveraging off the assets that Manawatu has. So Ampersand, Koru, Tahi, and those are just some of the examples there. But why do we exist? Well, it's to foster economic growth, and the last 18 months has hit home on that. And we've put our hand up to say this is what we're driving forward, and we're driving to do better. So it's fostering economic growth in Manawatu by championing innovative startups. And we've got a goal to champion 5 new high-growth startups in Manawatu by 2030, sorry. So what does this look like? It's 5 new Biolumics. 5 new companies that are creating 40 new jobs in the Manawatu. So some of the companies on the screen might look familiar to you, and these are some existing high-growth companies: Higgins, Glaxo Wellcome, Property Brokers, Obo, NZP. Today we've got companies like Biolumic, Mai Mahi, CropX, Frog Parking and Levno. The factory's really trying to find that company of tomorrow. That's our goal. And we want to bring you on this as well. So I don't want this to be a goal of just the factory and Nick and the team. I want this to be the goal of the Manawatu. When we achieve this, what does it mean? What's the economic impact? It's over 100 new high-value jobs. It's at least $35 million raised in investment that ultimately gets spent here. It's reputation and notoriety for Manawatu, and it's retention, attraction of people. And overall, one of those things is that also happens is wealth creation. Big lofty goal, and so how are we going to achieve this? Well, we've got a very clear strategic focus that focuses on 3 key things. Champion, which is an advocacy role. Supporting entrepreneurs and startups, so providing capability development and advice. And investment. So the companies that start up, they grow, and they need investment to further that growth. So it's providing them access to funding. In our champion role, it's being a connector, a concierge, and navigator for startups and entrepreneurs. It's being the voice for startups and entrepreneurs in the Manawatu, collecting data and insights so that we can feed this back to you. We can feed it back to CEDA. We can all provide, we can all be on the same page around what the region needs and where we're going. In terms of optics, we're going to do a showcase, and that's how we'll be able to present this to the region and the rest of New Zealand. Something which might be something that I just wanted to showcase was what does our stakeholders look like, and what does the ecosystem look like? We intersect with lots of different organisations, corporates, investors, other advocacy groups, governments, government departments, and research and development agencies. The support function of our business is around providing capability development and advice. So we'll be running tailored support to startups and entrepreneurs. We'll still be running Innovate, albeit slightly different format. We run a Startup 101 course, office hours, one-on-one mentoring, all the necessary resources to help a company get off the ground and grow. The final piece in the puzzle is investment, so it's providing access to funding. So we run an angel group, which has about 60 odd members, and we help facilitate investment. I wanted to keep it really brief and short for now, so hopefully I'm within time and I've left enough time for some questions. But I do have a question for you all, and it's, how do you see yourself being involved? How do you want to be involved?
Well, you've got about 6 questions coming in, Nick, so
Okay.
We'll ask you the questions and then we'll see what happens. I'm going to ask the first question. You said that Innovate's going to be slightly different. Explain what you mean by that.
Yeah. Innovate will be in its 12th year this year. And over that time, we've innovated every single year, and taking a good look about what the factory does, where its strategic priorities are. It's that we wanted to deliver something that is far more focused on economic growth. So the goals of the program have changed. It's still a great foundation for learning and building capability. There's some great assets there, but we are changing it to being more of a year-long program. It's not specifically at one point in time. So it provides access to anyone throughout the year to receive that support.
Great, thank you. Okay, let's get into the questions. The first one's from Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Nick, you mentioned in your opening comments that the factory has had a change in your funding arrangements. And I noted from your social media that the lounge has closed as well. So maybe those two things are connected, but those are my areas of interest.
So we've had some funding changes that have come directly from central government. So Callaghan Innovation was a major funder of ours, and there's been some changes within how they want to deliver incubation services, and this is taken away from the regions. It's the approach has been to support provide a national approach, and unfortunately, factory has always held its head on being a regional incubator, and we want to support Manawatu. So we were unsuccessful with that bid. And so what that's meant is we've had to refocus and adjust where needed. So the factory, we've held the factory building and established this 20 years ago. And it's time to pass the baton. And we'll be doing that on the 1st of November. So it's time to pass the baton to Food HQ, which has a lot of support around the table, and it's at a point where it can now help deliver on the Manawatu food strategy as well as part of its goals. So it's a great step for them, and it allows the factory to to focus really on economic growth and working with startups.
So I think that's news there to me. You're giving up the building that you're currently in. Where are you moving to?
We're still there.
Are you going to stay
Yep.
in there as well,
Yes.
share it with others?
Yep, yeah, there's 50 residents there. It's a humming environment, and we're going to be one of the tenants. So it's a great thing for us. We can focus on doing that.
Great. Thank you, Nick. Thanks, Madam Chair.
The Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Nick. The MIG, the investment fund which has got our people on it. What's the value of that, and what have they raised?
So there's been over $60 million we've helped raise for companies. MIG alone MIG members from Manawatu have invested over $30 million. In terms of valuation, I won't be able to tell you right now, but our funds have very good returns in the quite high multiples, and that's based off picking the right companies and working with them and providing the support they need.
So that's like a Dragon's Den sort of environment where companies pitch to the investor?
That's right. It's taking it a step further. So it's sitting down with them, spending a lot of time to undergo due diligence.
Great, thank you. Well done.
Finally, Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Nick. I just want to ask a bit of perhaps a difficult question. Given that today's stage it would seem Massey's moving away from a number of scientific and engineering courses, which to my understanding are a large part of the startups that you fund. How do you plan on filling that gap?
It's a really good question, and it's something that we've all been trying to come to terms with. And if I showed you my pipeline, thankfully, not a large proportion of it does come from Massey University. Okay. So the way we see this is there's going to be a shortage of students coming in and people that are wanting to train for engineering and science. But we're creating companies that can retain them here, give them a reason to move here, and that's where we see our role to play.
That's reassuring. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Nick. That's all the questions we've got. Thank you very much for your presentation today. Right, I will look to move the recommendation, seconded by Councillor Wood. We'll move into comment. The Mayor.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I wouldn't normally comment on a presentation, but I think it's worthy because we only see the factory every now and then. So times and things have certainly changed, and just want to compliment Nick and his board on adapting. There's been a very centralised model in terms of the funding, so unfortunately cities like Palmerston North miss out, and it just goes to the metros. So we're seeing that in action now, so they've had to adapt as well. And also just thinking about, do they still become a landlord of the factory, or do they just become a tenant? And I think they've made the right choice there and passed the baton on, as Nick put it, to Food HQ. So I think we don't lose there. But I think what we are gaining is that laser focus on what they do. And you saw the companies that they've produced or they've been part of, and some of them like Biolumic and Cropex are hugely successful economically in an export environment. And we don't quite get a handle on that here in Palmerston North because we're internally focused a lot. But, developing the startup entrepreneurs, I had no idea that the value was 60 million in terms of investment, and half of that came locally. So I think it just shows the value of the factory and the very, very small amount that we really do put into it via CEDA. So our funding line through CEDA. So thank you, Nick, and keep up the good work. Perhaps like to see you more than just once 18 months. Every year we'd love to see you, and thanks for the work. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd also like to commend you on changing your Innovate program. I think having a year-long program is a really good way to do it. I think it's a really good way to grow businesses by doing it for a year-long program. So I think that's also a good way to do it. There's no more comments in the queue, so we'll look to vote. That's passed 14, and with no one going against it, so we'll go to the next item. We're going to go to the minutes, and then we're going to go to CEDA straight after that. So we'll just change the agenda slightly. So we'll go 8, 9, and then 11. Okay, just changed it slightly. Okay, we'll do the minutes. We're going to do the minutes together. So we're going to do, unless anyone's got any objections, 8. Oh, you have got an objection? Okay, so we'll do confirmation of minutes for number 8 first. We're going to do them separately. Okay, move it. I'm moving it and seconded by Councillor Wood. Has anybody got any items they want to raise for the minutes of the 30th of August? Oh, sorry, Councillor Johnson, I was in a dream. Wasn't a great one.
Thanks, Madam Chair. It's just a question about the August minutes. There's a resolution for a report back on safety improvements to Puriri Terrace, but it's not in the work schedule. So I just wondered if that had been missed or if there's some other
I'll just
answer
ask
to that.
my governance colleagues. What page number are you referring to?
Thank you.
12.
Yeah, page 12 of our agenda must be 3223.
It's going to be added to the work schedule.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, any other issues? Otherwise, we'll look to vote. Okay, great. Right, that's passed 14 votes to nil. Moving to the next item, which is on page 17, which was the minutes of the 9th of October. Any items that anybody would like to raise from these minutes? I'm moving it, seconded by Councillor Wood. No, right. I'd like to vote on that, please. That's passed 11 votes for and 3 abstentions. Thank you. Just to the airport, we just to rearrange the agenda slightly, just to put CEDA ahead of you, just because their item is going to get through quite quickly, and I think your item isn't. It's my anticipation. So we're just going to move to number 11, which is on page 85. So if we can have Bobby and Jerry come forward. Sorry to just disarray that little thing to you. I know you've just turned up. Thank you, Bobby and Jerry. So everyone, we're on page 85. Oh, sorry, Jackie. Hand over to you. We've got one microphone, so... Oh, there is 2, and you just have to light it up. Over to you.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you, Madam Chair, and Mayor Grant and other elected members for the opportunity for CEDA to present our annual report for the 2022-23 year. Look, our economic performance as a region has held relatively steady, with GDP and electronic card spending up on the previous year, along with the value of consents and earnings. This reinforces our region in our ability to weather various economic headwinds of recent years, and it set us in good stead for where we are today. It has been a productive year, and on behalf of the CEDA board and the team, I'd like to thank our shareholders for their ongoing support and guidance, and we look forward to another strong year ahead, working together for the prosperity of Palmerston North and the Manawatu. I'll hand over to Jerry now, and he will overview of what the CEDA team have achieved over the year. Thank you, Jerry.
Kia ora, Madam Chair and elected members. Hard to believe we're back here again presenting our annual report. In fact, Jackie and I just talked yesterday about starting our half-yearly report for this year. I'm really pleased with where we've landed over the past year, and we've finished really strong in a number of fronts. We've had a high-performing team at CEDA, getting ourselves up to full staffing over the last year, which has been fantastic. Our statement of intent, we got everything achieved last year except for the discussions we'd previously had at this chamber around the Manawatu Regional Food Strategy, which has just actually been completed yesterday. So that's been a highlight for us moving that forward. In terms of our other key projects, progressing Te Tanganui continues to be a project of significance for us and will be for the next 30 years. We made some significant strides in that project, and particularly in advocacy over the last 12 months and in investment work. As I mentioned earlier, the Manawatu Regional Food Strategy has been progressing, and implementation and continuation of the outcomes of the Destination Management Plan continue to fill our day. Our focus on the inland investment pipeline for the region continues, and we've been pleased to be able to grow those projects that relate to Te Tanganui. We are continually searching for more opportunities such as hotel opportunities, and of course we were part with the airport and others, the chamber and other stakeholders around putting in the Air New Zealand Mission Next Gen opportunity, which we should hear about in the next month or so. We were successful in re-tendering for the Regional Business Partnership Program contract with the Ministry of Business and Innovation, which at the time of the last statement of intent we didn't have confirmed. So that was fantastic, and we've delivered on our KPIs there to be able to support in excess of 400 businesses across the region. We've changed and put in a different approach to our talent pipeline support. We have now 2 dedicated seniors who have responsibility for sectors of strength as by our 2 shareholders. Is great, and this is ensuring that we have more integrated and holistic approach to how we might fill that talent pipeline for the region. Another big kudos for us, I saw Nick used our 2.0 in his presentation, so the Manawatu 2.0 theme that we had was fantastic. It's created some targeted editorial for key sectors for us and ongoing media profiling, which has been great. This includes an events function on the manawatu.nz.co.nz website, which has been a calendar there since 2016 using New Zealand's most prominent event platform, Event Finder, and this lifts our profile not just regionally but nationally. The financial position at the end of the year saw us with a small surplus of 15,000, which was great. We had some variances in relation to additional government funding and related expenditure to support impacts of COVID-19. Some of the variances were we didn't deliver the agri-food talks last year. Also, as I said earlier, we didn't have the regional business partnership funded into our budget or calculated into our budget this year, so that caused a little bit of variance. We've made some great appointments over that time as well, including Tainui Woodmass as our Māori Relationship Manager. So in closing, we've had a fantastic year. We'll continue to focus on delivering for the region on behalf of our shareholders and being the engine under the hood for the regional economic development and prosperity. Lastly, I want to thank the board through Bobby's leadership, the CEDA team and our shareholders and partners. Without you, we could not achieve what we do. Happy to take questions.
Thank you. That's fantastic. So you're in a new space. Can you tell us about the new space that you've gone into?
Not yet. We're about to negotiate a new space. We should be able to tell you in 6 to 8 weeks.
Okay.
But yes, not quite.
Best kept secret in Palmerston North. Other highlights, your turnover of staff, what would that be at the moment?
That's a really good question. In fact, we had no resignations since November last year until about a month ago. And we've had 2 since. One is purely on the basis of a person who's relocated to Whanganui and the commute's just too much. And the other one's a part-time staff member who left or was leaving in about 2 weeks. who delivers on the Regional Business Partnership Program. So we have a very stable staff at the moment. Our turnover is very, very low, and our staff satisfaction is extraordinarily high, with a Net Promoter Score of in excess of 50. And so we're really, really happy with how the team's travelling at the moment.
Yeah, that's very good. Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Bobby. Thanks, Chair. Just interested around diversification within the economic development space, and I guess in looking through the indicators and et cetera, didn't necessarily feel like there was a really strong lens necessarily on diversification. Just wondered if you could tell us what you see happening, if anything, in the diversification space, and any thoughts about how we might go about better monitoring that in future.
Just for clarity, diversification in the sense of?
The regional economy.
Okay, so I guess part of it is that in terms of the diversity of what we would do would be seen in two spheres. One would be inward investment channels. Obviously, our direction is guided by the statement of expectation, which says that the three main large areas are destination management, food strategy, and Te Utanganui. But we're always looking for all sorts of alternative, what I call by shoot, opportunities where you. I'll give you an example. A company that was affected by the recent Cyclone Gabrielle was looking for a new location to grow fruit, and so we have to be very, very careful about how we might go for those diversification of how we grow food or whatever in the region, because we don't want to be seen to be jumping into a situation that's not of our making or could be seen to be taking advantage. But we're certainly open in terms of all of the opportunities to talk to any businesses that want to come through. We also see diversity in all the work we do around destination management. We're always talking to opportunities that might come along in terms of coming into the region to be part of that story and narrative. So we're very, very open to all comers, but are guided by that statement of intent.
Great, thank you. If I could just follow up then in terms of any insider advice you might have around how to monitor that kind of space.
Yep, so we have just put in place a new CRM for the organisation, which Greg Bignell's leading out. That CRM gives us some very clear by segment, by sector, by subsector data around where opportunities exist. For us, a great example of this is in the inward investment space. We can come to the table here and tell you about our successes, but for every success, there's probably 50 that you have to test the waters and not get across the line. So we will be able to come to Chambers soon once we get that running well and actually show what we've chased, what stage of that investment pipeline they're in, and what we've had success with.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Madam Chair.
The Mayor.
Thanks, Bobby. Thanks, Jerry. Thank you, Madam Chair. Around the Careers Expo, 3,000 secondary school students, visitors, career changers attending, and I know you don't have direct responsibility for that now because you sort of sub that out. That's dropped quite a bit. Just comments there?
Well, I think the numbers in terms of the year on year for the first 2 years being involved with the New Zealand Careers Group has grown, but you're right, from the halcyon days of pre-COVID, it's still starting to steeple up. The way I look at it is we do have, I think, a good number of high quality, students coming through who are really interested in what their careers look like. We do have a role to play in that in terms of CEDA does provide funding for schools for transport to get kids along to that event. So we do have a role and we do have an involvement with it from that perspective, but we are always talking with the provider around how we can grow those numbers.
Yeah, just an example, Jerry, and I won't enter into comment, Madam Chair, but is it more of a quality? Is it more of a quality rather than quantity? Is that what you?
I think there's a little bit of that, but I think it's also the changing nature of what we see across all parts of the education sector and how people consume their information and how they get their information. So it's not just a single touch engagement with one event. So there'll be a lot of the students who are looking at different ways of getting that information through the web and other ways as well.
Yeah. Okay, we'll leave it to comments. Thank you.
Councillor Zebellin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you. My question's about the regional food strategy, and particularly, I'm really interested in who the stakeholders you've identified are in the whole scope of paddock to plate in terms of food production. Who has had input, or what types of organisations have had input into developing that strategy and implementation plan?
Yep. So there's been over 60 people or organisations involved in stage 1 and stage 2 collectively, and they go from farmers, federated farmers, through to factory, science, Massey's been involved, Te Pokenga, through to Ovation Meats, all those sorts of, everybody inside that. We've had also Just Zilch. We've had other organisations like that involved, so it's been a very significant process. We've also had a separate channel for mana whenua and Māori agribusiness too, which concluded about 2 months ago. So we're really comfortable that that level of involvement's been high. I think what's going to be really exciting when we get it launched, which we're proposing at this stage to be December the 13th to coincide with the Food HQ function on that day, is that there are 13 strategic imperatives inside this strategy, which I think at least one of those will apply to almost anybody who's inside this conversation. So we're very excited about that. We've got 4 projects we've kicked off already in advance of the strategy being minted, which we did at 9:30 yesterday morning. So we'll be able to report on that this time next year.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Councillor Bowen.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Bobby and Jerry and team. Just a question on the social media campaigns, Live Here and the Profiling Our Lifestyle thing. So the goals there seem to be about engagement with those as campaigns, but how would we see if there was any outcomes beyond clicks and likes? How would we measure that?
Look, I can't give you that off the top of my head. Jan would be the right person to do that, but she's sitting comfortably up the back. But we can take that offline, or I can respond via email just to keep the flow of the conversation going.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Janet.
Thank you. That's all the questions. No one's come back in the queue, so thank you very much for your presentation today. I'll look to move the recommendation seconded by Councillor Wood, and we'll now move into comment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, thanks to CEDA, and we learnt a new phrase today, engine under the hood. Normally it's the watermark in the background, but well done, Jerry and Bobby and the wider team. I've been fairly close to CEDA and seen the change and the positive change really around certainly the three biggies that they've been doing. Obviously they're around people, business and place, but we all know about our logistics story, our Tū Tanganui opportunity, and it really needed somebody to drive that. And CEDA have certainly been part of that. And the fact this morning we just had port partners presenting to us from not only the Hawke's Bay, but Wellington tells us that it's more than just Palmerston North and the wider Manawatu. The regional food strategy, and we'll hear a little bit more about that in coming months and time, but that's all of the story. I think that's really exciting. It's the change in food and what we consume, how we consume, what we consume, future foods, new foods, really, really exciting stuff. And I think Palmerston North is on the cusp of something that is international there. And also the destination management plan, and that's always been a bit of an Achilles heel. Why come to Palmerston North? Well, we've got the 13th highest bed nights in the country out of 32 RTOs, and it's more than Taranaki. It's more than Hastings and some other places. So, you know, we've got to sometimes think about what we're really good at and perhaps what we're not that good at. So, focusing on the good things. But the destination management plan, I think, is focused on what we're really good at. Really interesting to see the engagement with Māori business, and the appointment of Tainui Woodmass, I think, has been a really good hire. He's engaging with everybody, and CEDA's entering into that big world of Māori business, which is huge. Some of the numbers are really good. I mean, the city in the wider region, GDP 2.6% increase against a target of 1.8. Our spending's up by visitors 13.4 against a target of 5.7, and our visitor night's up a massive 37% against a target of 1.6. I mean, that's a low target, by the way, and perhaps that might need to be revisited in the future. But I think the challenge now is to increase both the quality and quantity of our commercial accommodation. I mean, we hear time and time again that from secondary schools there's not enough of it, and then when you talk to the business community, where is the quality? So I think there's a challenge there for CEDA. I know you know about that and are fronting it well. And just finally, just on your own fiscal performance, you've operated within your own envelope really well, and yeah, really it's been a really good year in a challenging environment. So well done. Thank you.
Just to finally say some comments, I also think that having the regional business partnership, getting that up and running with the 400 businesses has been really good. And also having a CRM, I think having a CRM up and running is going really good for CEDA. And also hearing your turnover has been really low, even though over the last little while you've had a couple of people leave. Well, everybody has that happen, but it sounds like everything's very steady at CEDA, which is really good to hear. Having a 15K profit at the end of your financial year has been good as well. I think we've heard that for a long time. So well done to CEDA, well done to the management and to the board of CEDA for what you've done over this last financial year. Well done. No more comments, so we'll look to vote. Thank you. That's passed 14 votes for and none against. Thank you, CEDA. Right, we'll go back to item number 10, which is page 25 of your papers, and that is the airport. So we've got Steve and Murray coming forward. Oh, and David. And Jonathan and David. Welcome. So we'll
Madam
hand over
Chair,
to you, Steve.
I'll take this opportunity just to say a couple of brief comments, then have the board make their presentation, and I'd just like to wrap up with a couple of comments before you get into question time, if you don't mind. This time of the year, of course, is the opportunity for the board to, as part of the accountability cycle, come back to us, outlining how they've performed for the year to the 30th of June. And in the normal course, as a result of that, through the company structure, there'll be recommendations to the shareholder representative to have resolutions passed at an annual meeting of the company. This year, at the moment, in this paper, it's not actually asking for that to happen because of the issue to be addressed in relation to directors' fees, but at the next meeting of the council, there'll be a brief paper that I suppose brings together those recommendations for the annual meeting. So it is pleasing, from my perspective, to see the performance of the company over the last 12 months. When we look at all the measurements that there are, from financial to non-financial, they seem to me to reflect a performance that's above what we expected might happen in the statement of intent. So I think it's appropriate for us to hear from the board first, and then I'll make a couple of more comments.
I think I've got that working. This is a new piece of equipment. So, Madam Chair, Mayor, councillors, ladies and gentlemen, thanks very much for this opportunity. As Steve has outlined, we've got a presentation that we'd like to provide, and any questions you may have. I'd just like to precede those with some overview comments for the year in review. I suppose the biggest noticeable event for us over the year in review has been the bounce back of, if I could call it, a partial return to the pre-COVID normality in terms of passenger numbers. So that's helped us considerably towards higher revenues. And coupled with lower expenditure, we achieved a surplus beyond our targets. But I do have to caution some of that. We touch on it in our presentation. There were two non-recurring items collectively which come to about $800,000, plus there was some expenditure for maintenance on the runway which we couldn't complete in the last financial year, which will carry forward to this year. But collectively those things come to just under half of our profit. So we can't see those to be repeated into the year ahead. It's just to give some guidance on that. There were a number of achievements and deliverables across virtually every part of our business. David's going to touch on those in more detail in the presentation. One thing that was very, very significant to us in the year in review was the fact, I suppose we'll call it the discovery, that the terminal requires redevelopment and it's unavoidable expenditure. This is not something that we had planned for, but we are now much more familiar about. But it's also a generational opportunity. So it will be the most significant project undertaken by the company. We know we must do it well. We have experts advising us. We've got PNCC representation overseeing this activity as well, so that the shareholder has some more connection to it. And we'll touch on that too, just in our presentation. Over the past years, we've maintained a very strong balance sheet, with shareholders' funds now exceeding $84 million, and that's more than 100% growth in the last 10 years. During that same 10-year period, we've had 3 years impacted by COVID. There has been approximately just under $3 million worth of dividends paid to the shareholder, and no equity requested from the shareholder. So all of that growth has been generated within the company. And that contributes to our ability to finance a new terminal and some smaller commercial growth. So that gives us what we're really after in terms of enhancing the gateway to our city and furthering the drive to revenue diversification. Our governance and management teams remain strong. We have had change in each of those during 2023, and probably of a governance nature that I just wish to thank Gerard Gillespie, 15 years on the board, and he is retired at the end of June and has a replacement. Sarah Everton has a skill set aligned very much to the needs of Palmerston North Airport into the future. So if I just touch a bit on the year ahead, our future financial performance will be lumpy, and I mean that because there are non-cash items that will impact on our P&L, such as the write-off of the remaining value of our terminal. Now, we can't predict exactly when that'll be. Audit New Zealand is giving us guidance on that. Will it be on the date that the first spade goes in the ground, or the date of the contract signature, or whatever? So we think it will be in this financial year, but it will be significant. However, it is a non-cash impact. We know that there will be disruption, and we are developing means by which we reduce that in terms of the terminal development. We've also quite of the opinion that, as per previous discussions, dividend should be payable from this year's the fiscal 24 result, and we have factored that into our cash flow into the future. And the last item I was just going to touch on is one that you have here before you today, and that's about directors' fees. This time last year, you asked us to provide, or what you wanted, I believe, was more objective information to support the payment of those fees. And you have now two sets of data, one about peer organisations within New Zealand and the other one from the Institute of Directors. So that gives you some means by which to make your own assessment. If I could, Madam Chair, I'll then pass over to management to provide us a presentation for the year past.
Just to be clear, we haven't got this information, so we've only, well, we'll circulate this later, so no one's got this information. Okay, so don't try and look for it anywhere, we don't have it, okay?
Backwards.
You're going to make us a bit sick the way you're going.
One more.
Sorry, wasn't me. I think Murray's commented on a few of these points, but just ones that weren't touched on. Of course, underlying everything we do is compliance with our regulatory regimes, and so it was pleasing that we did maintain Part 139 compliance. Regrettably, we did have 1 day of lost time injury, which is the last day of the financial year, which was disappointing. Thankfully, that team member is fine. It's also important to note that it was a year of debt reduction. I think we reduced debt by about 3.9 million, which is really important when you think of what's ahead of us. And just finally, in terms of an overview, it was really about preparing for the terminal redevelopment and our warehouse construction opportunity, which we'll talk a bit more about in a minute. Oh God.
Too fancy.
It is too fancy for me. Pleasing to see that rebound that Murray talked about in passenger numbers to around 530,000 passengers, so pretty much back to 2016 levels, which was a pre-Jetstar number, if you like. You can see quite clearly up there what happened in the last 3 years, declines every year, so it was a pleasing outcome and caught us by surprise, as you realise. I think we had a budget of 459,000 passengers. If I start with our 5 Cs in terms of achievements, it was pleasing to achieve a Net Promoter Score of 45, which was above our SOI target of 30 and the prior year result of, I think, with 30 as well. Something like 7,000 survey responses. We introduced a new way of receiving feedback from our customers through our Wi-Fi at the airport, hence the huge number of responses, which gave us, I think, a fairly good base and again, a good outcome at 45. In terms of some of those key projects that got underway, our pick-up drop-off shelters got underway after a delay with COVID, and just in the last month or so we've seen those fully opened, including a bike zone. We also introduced some new signage within the car parks. It isn't 100% where we want it to be, but we're moving in the right direction. We joined the Sunflower Lanyard program. Some of you may be aware of that. It's a program for folks with disabilities who can register for a card, and when they wear that lanyard at the airport, we recognise that they may need extra assistance, and that's proved very popular. I think we had 70 applications for those lanyards during the year. Our team are fully trained on how to look after those folks. It was great, as we reported at our half year, great to achieve Qualmark Gold certification, first airport in New Zealand to achieve that. And as you well know, our terminal development program is progressing at pace. From a commercial perspective, underlying everything we do, of course, is our income diversification strategy, and that continued, albeit not as quickly as we'd like. Some great achievements, though, in terms of Waitomo opening their petrol station on P&AL land, so that's a ground lease. And we also have Haerenga Hydrogen Truck Stop, which is opening in about a month, I believe. That's also on airport leased land. CleanCo Truck Wash Facility, that was a land sale. And as you're probably aware, we continue to work on a program to bring to the market 2 3,000 square metre freight and logistics warehouses. And we're presently in discussions with a partner for one of those warehouses. And also with that project, we're of course looking for a partner who can help fund it. We have a budget for approximately 50% of that project, and we're looking for someone to help us with the other 50%. In terms of culture, I think the important thing here is a bit like I heard from Jerry. Staff retention and turnover have historically been issues for us. We continue to invest in our one team whānau Kotahi program, but we also undertook a comprehensive REM survey across our full team. And as a result of that, I'm very happy with the people we have now. We've had a couple of resignations in the last year, I think 3 across the full team of 26, but we're at full complement now, and I'm pretty sure most folk are happy, and that team engagement score up there I think reflects that people are happy to be working with us at the airport. I mentioned compliance. Again, 139 is our critical measure, Part 139, and we maintain that compliance. 2025 will be our next annual audit. It's a 5-yearly audit, so we'll be gearing up shortly in preparation for that. Again, we had that one lost time injury, 1 day, which was disappointing. Other activities included ongoing improvement in our asset management plan and focus on maintaining our airside assets particularly. We had to delay our runway surface treatment spray. That's the picture on the left there. A sunscreen lotion rather for runways. That will happen hopefully in November or December this year. And we also completed the first stage of an airport drive upgrade. This year's upgrade has been put on hold, as you all recognise, because of the work with council around vesting. In terms of our community, we continue to invest, although modestly, in some key activities around Arena, Just Silch, Wild Base, Centrepoint and the Palmy Dragfest. Our relationship with Rangatane continues to be strong, and they of course heavily involved in our terminal co-design. And our chair, Mr. Georgiel, as you may realise, is involved in the Te Iu Tanganui steering group, critical project for all of us. From a sustainability perspective, we have lodged our application for level 4. Haven't got it through yet. We've paid the fee, so we're just waiting for the rubber stamp now. We've moved from a 2-degree target to net zero emissions by 2035, so we've made it tougher on ourselves, but that's fine. We're up for the challenge. During the year, we reduced our emissions, scope 1 and 2, by 109 tonnes. I think we're down now to something like 77 tonnes left to go. We entered into an MOU with Haerenga Energy around how we can utilise the on-site hydrogen production facility. And as most of you will be aware as well, with CEDA's help, we have put our name forward as an airport to be involved in Air New Zealand's next generation aircraft project from 2026. There's a snapshot of our reduction in CO2e, scope 1 and 2. And this is a breakdown of what's left to go. So this year, the natural gas component will be totally eliminated. It's fully turned off, but we didn't turn it off, I think, until October last year. So there was about 9 months of natural gas still within our numbers. So the next cab off the rank, so to speak, is diesel. And so we're starting to look at ways we can reduce that further as well. Okay, where are we up to now? So some of the key metrics, I won't go through all of these, but income, very pleasing result at 12.6 million, ahead of the target of 9.5, and that was driven by that uptick in passenger numbers, which also flowed through to things like car parking and concession income. In terms of expenditure, I think we were 1% below budget, helped of course by that deferral of the cessed treatment on the runway, but nevertheless a good result in keeping our costs in check. EBITDA strong because of that income result, 6.1 million, and then the surplus that Murray talked about at 2.9 million, assisted by land sale, investment property revals and that cessed deferral. In terms of asset spend, not as much as we planned. I think it was about 12 million we planned to spend, but really the majority of that was in relation to the TDP and those warehouses. Both of those projects have slipped slightly, and so we didn't see significant spend on either of those. But up there you'll see where we did spend the 2.4 million. Balance sheet, again, Murray emphasised the increase in shareholder wealth to 84.3 million. Total assets 106 million, down slightly from FY22, and total liabilities 22.6, but debt pleasingly down from 14.7 million to 10.8, again as we prepare for what's ahead of us with the TDP spend and the warehouses. So in terms of FY24, as Murray mentioned, it's going to be a lumpy year and because of the terminal write-down. In terms of passenger volumes as well, things are starting to soften, and you would have read about that, no doubt, in the media with Air New Zealand's commentary around the economy and the impact on travel. We're still predicting a stronger revenue, or revenue growth rather, versus 23. And that's driven primarily by aeronautical pricing, which has been set in place with Air New Zealand. So notwithstanding a potential softening in passenger volumes, the pricing has been established at a good level. Expenses, 8.3 million predicted. What else can I talk to you about? So again, the terminal demolition is something that we still haven't got full visibility on in terms of how that'll impact on our financial performance. It is non-cash though, it's important to mention that. It's a non-cash item which won't impact on underlying results or our plans to look at a dividend. We continue to work with Wade and his team on Airport Drive vesting. We're not sure of when that may happen, but that's pretty sure it'll happen in this current financial year. In terms of the dividend, again, while we see the year as lumpy and we have that terminal write-down, they're not going to impact on our desire to pay a dividend, and so we'll be talking more about that in the coming months. Should we head on to this? You happy to do that? Okay, so again, Murray touched on the director's fees piece of work that we were asked to look at. So we commissioned Strategic Pay to undertake a review for us of director fees. And you'll see there the first bullet point at the bottom of the page, a recommendation came back of a range of 148,000 to 160,000. And that was a lower quartile view for comparative organisations. What we've also done, thanks to Jonathan, is look at other regional airports and also Queenstown Airport, which we sort of see as a aspirational airport to get to in terms of income and balance sheet, if you like. It's not in the averages, but you'll see that the average for the regional airports is around 165,000, so just above the top end of the Strategic Pay recommendations. And so management have looked at that, and we believe that our directors, a fair and reasonable remuneration for the 5 would be 165, so bringing them in line with the average of those regional peers. And just noting that that is an average of FY23, so we'd still be 1 year behind if council accepted a level of 165. If I can just talk briefly about our terminal redevelopment. Murray talked a bit about it at the beginning, but it's not a nice to have. It's a 30-year-old facility that's at end of life, and we recognise we do need to have a gateway that brings our region to life. It's important for us that it's a journey with Rangatane, and we're going to show you a video in a second about that journey we've been on. We do have P&CC involvement via Chris Dyberg on the Terminal Property Development Committee. So Chris is across the journey that we're on. We're just entering early contractor involvement now, so we have shortlisted 4 construction firms, and we'll be about to appoint 1 construction firm, and they will be with us at the table through detailed design. We see that as really important because we recognise that there's going to be significant disruption to our airport and to our community, to airport users, when we start demolishing in a live operating environment. Just quickly, the top image is the footprint, if you like, of the proposed terminal, and the bottom image is the current terminal. So it gives you a view that it's roughly the same length as the current terminal, including our valet shed, but it's a lot deeper. It's 36 to 38 metres deep compared to about 30 now. So it gives us a much more efficient shape and a much more efficient flow of passengers, arriving and departing passengers. In terms of demolition, at this stage, and again we haven't got a contractor on yet, but there's been a lot of work looking at how we demolish and maintain operations. So the plan at this stage is that we demolish the west end, so that's the end with the dotted lines around it, left end, yeah, the orangey piece, and so we're going to operate arrivals and departures from the remaining terminal and the valet shed. So it's going to be difficult, there's going to be significant disruption, but we don't have a choice. Okay. Yep. Yeah.
Have we got many more presentations?
There's a video, Madam Chair.
Oh, video, okay.
Kia ora, my name's David Lanham, Chief Executive here at Palmerston North Airport. We're immensely proud of our role as kaitiaki of Palmerston North Airport, our region and city's gateway to Aotearoa in the world. We recognise that for many travellers, their airport experience is possibly their first or last interaction with our city and our people, and we take that role really seriously. Our terminal served us well for the past 30 years, however its ability to serve us into the future is limited. The terminal redevelopment is an intergenerational investment and arguably the largest in our long history, and it's one which must hold us in good stead well into the future. Key considerations in the design of the new terminal include addressing the present terminal's limitations around passenger volume growth and seismic resilience. In addition, we recognise the need to be able to accommodate future volatility within the industry, change within the regulatory environment, technological innovation and climate change. Equally, the new terminal provides us with an opportunity to recognise our airport's whakapapa and our whanaungatanga with our people and our mana whenua.
Probably the important thing is the relationship we have with the airport. When you're playing lanes and you walk through the terminal, the first thing is you get hit with the people of that area. It's important, especially when we get visiting iwi arriving by plane, to know who the people are of this area, and that's our role as rangatane. In my viewpoint, what we're doing now is fulfilling of the treaty, because if you look at the crest, you've got Māori and non-Māori. And we've been very fortunate with the CEO there, Rawiri, commonly known as David, broke down a lot of barriers, and their staff would come out here, stayed on our marae, and out of those relationships comes partnership. And the whole history for Rangatani here in our meeting house is all about relationship and partnerships.
That relationship's been really good, and it gets better all the time. And Rawiri every year brings his staff out to the marae, and they have programs out there and learn a bit about our history and who we are.
We were very pleased to be introduced to the opportunity of having a co-design relationship with Rangatane, and I think that's an initiative that David and the airport really brought to the front, of saying that it was one of the sort of drivers of the project. We took a hold of that and made it a priority for us to build that relationship with Rangatane.
The terminal design starts with a whole lot of functional things. The terminal has to be a safe and functional place, but beyond that, the interesting thing is that the whole thing of arrival and departure is so important. The building intrinsically has a narrative. Whether we like it or not, it will tell a story. And the thing that we are able to do with our partners from Rangatane is tell a story that has meaning for the area and has a connection to the whenua that the airport stands on. And that's the thing that is really kind of beautiful as an architect, because it is connecting us to the place that we're building in. It's so much better than just doing a terminal that could go anywhere.
We've looked at a number of themes really. One of the appropriate themes we thought would be that of Matangi. He'd heard of the great flocks of birds that occupied this part of the island, and his story begins from here. The airport's in a sort of a rough line between the point Tirohanga on the Tararua Ranges and Whakaari, which follows the flight of those birds and the journey that Matangi may have taken.
The story was taking place in the forest, and so the building we can create has the trees of the forest and make the building have its columns go into the canopy of the trees. And the thing that's really great is because we started right at the beginning, the whole of the building reflects the story of Matangi rather than it just being applied to a surface. It's not just a thing that's stuck onto the glass, it is actually intrinsic to the building itself.
We share the similar concerns, in terms of budget constraints, design constraints. It becomes a journey that we walk together from the outset.
The current narrative will be in some ways placed into the terminal, and we understand we have some budget restraints. So there is a core Wi-Fi form that was developed in the wind lobby, which we're hoping to put back in, and that was done by Kiriyama Taiapa. We also have some work by Craig Kawana, which is a pari above the door as you come in from arrivals. We're kind of going to look at ways where we can use those in various forms.
It's all about relationship, I guess. That we walk a journey together and co-create.
Madam Chair, originally I'd said that maybe I'd have some additional comments following that, but having heard what's been said, I don't think there's any need for me to say anything more at this stage.
I'm going to suggest we have a 15-minute break right now, just because I know there's going to be a lot of questions coming, and that's what I think it's probably best to have the break, and then we go straight into the questions. Okay? Right, we have got the Mayor, your first question. Go.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That's quick off the blocks. Thank you. I've actually just cured most of my questions in our break.
Can we quiet, please, over there?
But if I could just ask one thing, Palmy Proud magazine, can we get that back into the terminal?
It is in the terminal.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, by Airport Help.
Oh,
Yep.
brilliant. Thank you.
Right, Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to the airport team. Just a couple of questions from me. I see on page 10 of the annual report, it says donations, the company made donations that made no donations this year. Your slide, of course, showed that you made a number of donations to the community, so I just want to understand if that's a difference in terminology. It says for 2022, so perhaps it was a copy and paste from the previous year that just needs to be updated to 23.
There's a distinction between donations and sponsorship. So the likes of Just Zilch, etc., those all fall under sponsorship or under the broader bucket of marketing. Donations are donations to registered charities such as Red Cross, for example.
Right, appreciate that clarification. I thought there'd be something like that. On page 17, around your commercial targets, one of them is that you've got tenants secured and construction underway of the Ruapehu Aero Park, and it says that you're within 10% of target. The presentation you gave was that you're around 50% leased. I just wanted to get a feel. You said you're in negotiations for the other 50%. At what stage are you at? Have you drawn up a memorandum of understanding, an ATL, or waiting on a deed lease? What stage are you at?
We are close to getting an agreement to lease in place with one tenant, which will be 50% of the total building.
I see. All right. Appreciate that clarification. If you bear with me just one moment, I'll go to where I'm looking. On page 28 of the annual report, so for councillors following along, that's page 59, it says under the land and building airside infrastructure fair value that the auditors suggested a decrease in value of $3 million. The company considered that this movement's not sufficiently material to warrant that recognition, but I see then following under buildings, you did feel that a decrease of 230,000 was sufficient enough to warrant a decrease. So I just wanted to understand why, I'm sure there is some reason, but why that 3 million a decrease wasn't recognised.
I think materiality is about $4 million, $6 million on property, plant and equipment. So you've got a choice on whether you do or do not book these things. The reason why we revalued everything last year, so it would be out of cycle to rebook this year, but that doesn't stop us if we chose to. The particular reason why we chose to book buildings this year of $2.3 million downwards was the terminal. So the longevity of the terminal, as we know, is shorter. So by booking that this year, it smooths out that flow through the P&L in future years of that lumpy accelerated depreciation that David and Murray talked about earlier. So it was deliberate to help the future years with the write-off of the terminal.
Makes sense, thank you very much. And just final question on page 34 of the annual report, which is 65 on councillors' documents. Under employee expenses, I see there's been an increase of 1 FTE. My calculation is you've gone from an average of 104,000 per FTE to an average of 27,000 of salary and wages per FTE. So that's a 22% increase for staff pay. Just wanted to get a feel of, is that reflective of staff pay, or was it that the increase in FTE was a few high-paying jobs and doesn't reflect a, I guess, organisation-wide increase in staff pay?
There's a range of nuances in that, councillor. Vacancies in F22 were quite high, and there was a couple of roles that were lower skilled roles that were disestablished and replaced with higher skilled roles. So there's a range of factors making that change seem significant.
No, that answers the question. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Naylor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A few questions from me. Just firstly, the community investment or the sponsorship. What's the total amount invested in the last year?
50,000.
Thanks. And you talked about in your presentation the revised dividend policy, which gives greater flexibility. I'm just wanting to understand who that gives greater flexibility to, and what you mean by what that looks like for us.
The first thing about a dividend policy is that there's some structure to our thinking rather than simply a formulaic approach of, say, 40% or 20% or 10%. It also takes account of governance fiduciary responsibilities insofar as it's not always possible, even if the shareholder desires a certain outcome, for governors and directors in this case to take a certain stance. However, what we thought we would do is bring that together as best we could into a dividend policy which takes account of what our shareholding should, what our capital expenditure should be for the future ahead, what our cash flows are and so on, such that we might be able to be more reflective of changing that cash flow to enable a dividend payment.
Okay, thank you. So how, that more flexible approach, how would that give certainty to the shareholder in terms of our planning, such as long-term plans, in terms of us assessing what our potential revenue might look like for the years ahead?
Essentially, that would come up under discussion during SOI presentations, where the company would proffer its expected turnout in terms of financial performance and cash flow and what that would look like, and some discussion about where our capital expenditure is going and so on, and seek out some shareholder thoughts or expectations on it.
Okay, thank you. So is that more flexible approach in place already, or are you flagging that that's something you're wanting to move to?
Well, we're suggesting, we adopted this policy and saying that it will apply from the current year's financial results.
The one that we're looking at?
The one for fiscal 24.
Okay.
So the year ended June 2024.
Okay. Now, I'm just looking at the operating results on page 26, and you've mentioned the increase in passenger numbers reflecting higher revenue and therefore also a much higher surplus than what the statement of intent had indicated, with the 2.9 million surplus. You know, I presume when you did the statement of intent and set your budget for the year, and your decision around the asking for the dividend to be suspended was based on your budget of 745,000 surplus. Having so much of a better financial outcome for the 22-23 year, does that change your thinking about the position that you may be in to provide a dividend?
You're correct. We did make the initial assessment about dividends around the SOI target, and the result is considerably better. As I mentioned, nearly half of that bottom line improvement is one-off and non-cash. So we've looked at that and said it isn't as if we have benefited by $1.5 million of extra cash in our bank as a result. And looking too at our cash into the cash demands across the next year, we felt that having had the discussion with the shareholder and agreement on our SOI, where there wasn't a dividend for this calendar year, that it would enable the company to better perform into the future by not paying that as we had agreed in our SOI.
Okay, thank you. The intent in the report states somewhere, I think it was in perhaps 3.3, that the dividend is planned to be reinstated for the 23, it remains committed to commencing the dividend payments from 23-24, which is the current financial year. What is the amount for that is determined for the dividend for this current year?
Yeah, so the 23-24 financial year, we're in it now, but that's not the one we're reporting on.
Yeah.
But looking ahead, we have just under $200,000 in our SOI as a dividend payment.
200,000?
It's 195,000, I believe.
Okay, and would that, that seems quite a lot lower than the 40% that it used to be. Is that part of the flexible arrangement, or?
Yes, that's right. So in this discussion that we had last year, the shareholder made it quite clear on the expectations that you'd like to see at least the start to, say, 10% initially, and that's what we have budgeted.
Okay, thank you. And so just to confirm if I'm correct in my understanding, if a dividend for the 23-24 year, is that paid in the 23-24 year or is it the following year, is it?
It's, yes, it's paid about November or so, November, I think, of the year. So it would be in November next year.
So it kicks in, so our first dividend won't kick in until year 2 of the LTP, is that correct? Okay, thank you.
I think they've answered that now.
Yep.
Yep, great.
Yep, I just
Got it
wanted that clarity.
Okay.
Just in terms of the year, it being deferred by a year. Thank you. The, just moving to the director remuneration, page 39, in the annual report, in our papers, the annual report shows the increase in the last year from 2022 to 23, that 20% increase, and in addition to that, reducing that down from 6 to 5 directors meant quite a substantial increase in terms of percentage for directors in the last year. I'm just wondering, given that, wanting to understand the timing of the request for that to be further increased now, given the step up perhaps within the last 12 months?
I think this is based on exactly what you asked for, which is objective data, which says that the current payments are well below peer airports and Institute of Director comparisons. So it's only appropriate that there is a fair remuneration for a fair input, which is what these payments will represent. You'll see that there might have been an increase, which meant that we were too far behind in previous years.
Okay, thank you. And the final question is probably for the officer. In terms of the director remuneration, would it be an option for us to consider moving to a regular CPI increase, setting up a policy that gives a regular increase without the P&L needing to come and request certain amounts? I'm not sure if that happens every year or if it's every few years, but would that be a possible way forward?
It seems to me that what we're principally keen to know is that what's being remunerated is appropriate for the task being required and is appropriate to attract the level of directors that we want. And so we need to take stock from time to time with the market in order to do that, and a CPI adjustment won't necessarily give us that, but it might be something that could be used as an intermediate step for perhaps a couple of years with a third year of review. But having said that, if we looked back, say, over this last couple of years with CPI adjustments, when CPI for 2 years has been, for the June CPI numbers, 7.3% and 6%, then that figure being moved, which was last moved up to 135,000 from 1 July 21. So even 2 years worth of CPI adjustments would take it to 154,000 nearly. So that's quite, with those significant CPI adjustments, we would be. But I guess in response to your question, it is possible to have something like that as a policy. If that were the policy, we would still need to have I guess, an ordinary resolution of the company each year that would embrace whatever the outcome was in terms of applying that principle.
Okay, thank you. And the figures that came through that were provided, I think, showed about a 76% increase since 2016. Would that be in excess of CPI, or would that align with CPI?
I haven't gone back to 2016 to double check that change, but certainly just in checking those last couple of years, quite significant.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks, Councillor. Can I just ask one question to the CE? The progress on the vesting of the airport drive, where is that up at?
Yeah, through Madam Chair. So we have been having conversations with David and his team about that. We just need to do some work at our end. But I think that both parties agreed that vesting that into council and getting that done as soon as practicable is the right thing to do. So we may need to bring a paper back into the chamber as well around that.
So will it be done in this financial year or next financial year?
Yeah, I think the intention for us is to actually look at getting it done in this financial year. We do some work around checking the quality of the current infrastructure and a couple of things around that.
Thank you. Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair, and thank you for the presentation this morning. I've just got a couple of questions. The first one really is just around the terminal development, and at this point in time, I know it's fairly early in the piece, but do we actually have a feel for the level of disruption that we might actually anticipate for, the demolition and the reconstruction of the new terminal in terms, I guess, of time? And secondly, is there any risk there in terms of capacity and risk to passenger numbers for us?
Very good questions. In terms of the disrupt, the plan is about 2 years. So 1 year operating out of the eastern end of the terminal, and then 1 year operating out of the half-finished left end or west end of the terminal. In terms of impact on air services, we are not anticipating any. It's going to need more intensive day-to-day management of apron access, etc., but we're not anticipating any impact at this stage.
Great, thank you, David. And the second question just relates to the directors' fees. I noted in the material that was provided to us that Hawke's Bay Airport, their directors' equivalent fee are set at $129,596. Do we have an understanding of where they are at in terms of setting the fees for the Hawke's Bay Airport, their directors?
We haven't spoken to them directly. Those numbers are gleaned from their annual report. The 129 is reflective of the fact they had a vacancy for part of the year, so it is underrepresentative of what they would be paying at a full complement.
Jonathan, do you want to use the microphone?
Sorry, so those numbers were gleaned from Hawke's Bay's annual report. We haven't spoken to them directly. The 129 is reflective of the fact they had a vacancy for part of the year, so their true figure is higher than that. But I don't know exactly what that would be with a full complement, but that is why they are showing below their other peers.
Yeah, look, that's very helpful. I just really wanted to get an understanding of the low ball numbers which we were provided, so just to add some context. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks for your report. I noted that you said that passenger numbers had recovered to be just a little higher than the 2016 numbers, but in 2016 you were paying a quite substantial dividend, weren't you? I mean, I haven't looked it up, but from memory I think it might have been 450 or 500,000. Do you remember what the dividend was in 2016?
Don't recall it offhand, but you're right, we did pay a dividend and it was based on a percentage of the net profit.
That's right. So what is significantly different now compared to 2016 that is making you say that you can't restore the full dividend, that you have to have a flexible policy?
The most significant difference is the outlook, our future outlook, and the expenditure we must have into our infrastructure over the next few years. That is the most significant difference. I suppose it's also valid to comment that over the last 2 to 3 years, our financial performance hasn't been as strong as it had been earlier either, because of COVID and because of the lesser number of passengers. Hence, we hadn't put aside probably as much as we could have in those occasions as well. But mostly it's about our future outlook.
Okay. So would it be fair to summarise your answer as saying it's because of the capital expenditure that you expect because of the airport terminal rebuild?
Yes.
Okay. So that is still around the 35 million mark, is it?
40 million.
40 million. So if we were looking at a dividend of, say, 500,000, the logic of saying that that 500,000 is going to have a significant impact on your need to borrow 40 million, it doesn't make sense to me in terms of the quantities that we're talking about. On the one hand, 40 million capital expenditure, and on the other, 500,000, which is more or less 0.5% off rates for your average ratepayer in Palmerston North. So can you help me understand that?
It does take account of our outlook on the future, and clearly it is the terminal development plan which factors significantly into that. Any amount of money paid out in terms of cash will have an impact on what we do and the extra borrowings. We've taken what we believe to be the right approach. Others might not have that view, but that's the way we've put that forward.
Okay, so just moving on then to your flexible dividend policy. That's all right. So just moving on then to the flexible dividend policy. So my understanding is that gives you the flexibility to determine where you think the dividend should sit. Do you think there should be flexibility the other way, that the shareholder should have an input into where they think the dividend should sit, or is the flexibility just sitting with one side?
No, in fact, the directors have to take on board shareholder expectations as well. That's one of the considerations.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of quick questions. On the demolition, half and half over 2 years, have we talked to Air New Zealand about the impact on their particularly lounge services, and what's their feedback been on that?
We work very closely with Air New Zealand on this, and the regional lounge has been factored in. It won't be impacted to the extent of other aspects of the terminal. They'll move from their current location into the new location, so no interim steps or no disruption.
Thank you. And then secondly, probably, or maybe for Steve, in the question answer to, I think, Councillor Hancock's question, Steve, about remuneration, you said that it was important that we had appropriate remuneration for the job to get the directors that we want and need going forward. But earlier the chair talked about how pleased he was with his new appointment to the director. So I suppose my question is, are we unhappy with how we're playing in this market? Are we unhappy with the amount of applicants we're getting, or the quality of the applicants that we're getting when we recruit to the board?
In terms of the quality of the applicants, not something that I'm qualified to comment on. In terms of whether or not the level is appropriate, I guess it's just a bit of a test to the market, and that information that you've been provided with from those various sources comparatively with others and with the work done by Strategic Pay makes suggestions about what might be in a market a reasonable sum. Whether it's satisfactory or not to the board members, I guess they're bringing forward a suggestion for change. So from my interpretation of that is that their expectation is that there would be an increase.
Madam Chair, I wonder if I could get a comment from the CE, who is part of that panel, as to whether we think we've got a problem with our airport recruitment that will be solved by increased remuneration. Through you, if that would be okay.
Through the chair, we are getting some good applicants for the panel. I think that the issue is the board being appropriately remunerated compared to other airports and other market information. So that's my 6 to 1 half dozen the other. Really, at the end of the day, we are receiving some good applicants. Is increasing the remuneration likely to mean that we might get more applicants in the future? We won't know that until there's another vacancy actually created on the board.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Barrett.
Well, thanks, Madam Chair. Just a couple of questions. First, really appreciated the update around sustainability outcomes, and just that did turn my mind to thinking about this new building. Can you give us a sense of where you're going in terms of sustainable building standards around the terminal?
With the contractor engaged, we'll be starting to think more deeply about where we can achieve green building standard levels. At this stage, it's aspirational, but we're wanting to understand cost implications around that, and we can only do that once we've got the construction firm at the table, but it's certainly in our sights.
So is that looking at the actual standards, you know, like the New Zealand Green Building Trust, et cetera, type approaches, or is it more just a DIY approach in terms of figuring out what you want to do there?
No, look, with experts at the table, we'll be looking at the New Zealand Green Building Standards and what we can achieve.
Great, thank you. Question then around directors' remuneration as well. We've been provided some historical context of kind of where those numbers have been at over the recent years. For this airport, just wondering, do we have any historic data on any of the comparators in terms of how they've trended over time?
I don't think we do.
Right, thank you. Finally then, around the dividend policy, still trying to understand a little bit of the nuances of P&L's view there. Is your view that there is a balance to be struck between shareholder expectation and fiduciary responsibility, and ultimately it's the board's decision around where that balance is?
Ultimately, it is the board's decision from a fiduciary perspective. However, if the shareholder overrides that, they can do so, but they will remove the obligation from the directors.
And could I get a comment that maybe from our staff then about how that plays out in terms of our setting of expectations going forward?
I think we already got that before.
Apologies if I missed it then.
I think if I could comment briefly, that we have a statement of intent at the moment that has the policy in it as agreed and written by the company and then agreed to by the council. So that is, I guess, the operative policy. In terms of how we go about using that for the outcome for the 23-24 year, and then our planning as well for our long-term plan, we'll be with the company about that, some preliminary assumptions about dividend expectations and levels in our very first cut for the LTP stuff, based on the current SOI for the company for the 3 years, and then projected that out. But we will need to have some further discussions with them about, you know, about that as part of the development of our long-term plan, and that's what we would intend to do.
Thanks. So I guess if, in a practical sense, if there is a level of, let's say, dissatisfaction with where we get to an FY24 dividend, is there an opportunity to revisit or intercept the 3-year SOI so that we can make adjustments on the go, or are we locked in?
No, we're not locked in. The SOI is reviewed each year and comes back to you for consideration.
Great, thank you. Madam Chair.
Thanks, Councillor. 2 more to go. Councillor Zabilin, and then the Mayor, and then that's the final set of questions. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you. Just wanted to touch on future outlook, which was a term I heard before, and particularly picking up on that comment about Air New Zealand's warnings, perhaps, of softening passenger numbers. How concerned are you about that trend continuing and its impacts on your plans for the next few years?
It is a concern, just the extent of the downturn we don't know. if you remind yourself of the chart we put up of passenger volumes, it's become an inherent part of our business now. And it really just reinforces the need for us to consider and fast-track income diversification around the property portfolio.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And one further question regarding the dividend policy. That's a new policy, to my understanding. It hasn't been road tested yet in terms of considering a dividend payout.
Correct.
Okay, thank you very much, Madam Chair.
The Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Probably to you, Stephen, just on this dividend ball that's been getting chucked around. I'm unsure, Steve. We approved the flexible dividend policy, didn't we?
A flexible dividend policy, not, oh, yes, a dividend policy, we did. Yes, it's part of the SOI that we approved for this year now in place.
So we own that as
yes, we do.
Okay. Secondly, if we don't want to go down that path, we can just vote it down or do whatever we want to do. Is that right?
If there are differences of opinion between the council and the board in terms of the recommendations, yes, there's a path that needs to be followed, and we'd work through that between the two parties.
Okay, so it's pretty simple. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. That's the question. Right. Look to the recommendations. So the first recommendation, which is number 1, I will move with Councillor Wood seconding, and then I'm putting up a second recommendation to do with, which we'll just get it up on the screen. The increase to the remuneration of the director fees. I'm suggesting that we increase it to 146, and that is been seconded by Councillor Wood. And is there a third recommendation? Yep. So number 3 is, have you got it? Yep. Have you got Councillor Naylor's recommendation? We'll put that one up as well. Councillor Naylor's recommendation, and she's just going to, we're just going to put it up on the screen first, Councillor Naylor, so that everyone can see the 3 recommendations. So the first one is that we receive the annual report and financial statements for the Palmerston North Airport Limited for the year ending the 30th of June 2023. The second one is that we will increase the total remuneration for the direction for from 135 per annum to 146 per annum. And the third one is that the Chief Executive establish a policy of regular CPI incentives for the P&R direction fees, and that's been put up by Councillor Naylor, and it's seconded by Councillor Wood. So those are the 3 recommendations. We'll now go into comment. Councillor Naylor, you want to comment first?
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks to the Airport Board on a really good performance for the past year. I think the passenger numbers in particular that exceeded the statement of intent did help significantly in producing a good financial outcome. I think for me, I find it a little bit disappointing that despite such a good financial income, such a good financial performance for the year, that doesn't translate to any financial benefit to our ratepayers in terms of a dividend. And looking at that 2.9 million surplus, under our previous policy, 40% of net profit after tax would have been 1.18 million that we could have applied to year 1 of our LTP, which is about 1% less that we would be charging people for rates next year. So that is, I recognise that where we've got to is as a result of recommendations by PL Board as well as Council's response to the majority support. My position is that I haven't supported that and continue to be disappointed with how many years that the suspension of the dividend has been going on since, quite a few years ago now, where the COVID was the reason for that. Now, when we look at that, with it being deferred, the impact of any dividend not being paid till the following year, and we won't even, as it stands currently with the statement of intent, we would only see 195,000 reinstated in year 2 of our LTP. I think that falls well short of the council direction that was given late last year, that the dividend be reinstated within 2 years. My understanding of that at the time would have been that the payments would be reinstated within 2 years, not 3 years or more, and particularly at such a small amount. So I'm really interested in us looking at that. Obviously, we can't do that today. Today is about looking at the annual report from the last year, but when the statement of intent comes around, whenever that happens, I'm really just wanting to indicate to colleagues now that I think that's something that we should look to. I've also said my view on the sponsorship or the community investment. I think that's a really nice thing to do, particularly when there is a dividend being paid. In the absence of a dividend being paid, a dividend benefits all ratepayers. Sponsorship benefits a small number of ratepayers. If the dividend is suspended, I also think that sponsorship opportunities should also be suspended until such time as all ratepayers can benefit from an overall dividend. That's my view, and I have expressed it before. If it's not, perhaps it needs to be put in some sort of resolution to get to test whether there's support for that round the table and give that direction more clearly. But that's my view. So in terms of, I'm happy to support the recommendations. The increase that is indicated there is around an 8% increase, which is fairly in line with what our council staff have received in the past year. Given the 20% increase the year before, I think that's quite adequate. I recognise the reports in the paper that do indicate quite a wide range of what's out there in the market. My personal view is that the performance of our directors is not being impeded through lack of funds in this regard. So I also feel like it's a little bit of an uncomfortable thing each time the airport come and ask for an increase to the remuneration. I have reflected on that, and I do think that it's probably my preference would be to establish a policy where there is a CPI increase on an annual basis. That wouldn't preclude, if that for whatever got out of step and we weren't recruiting quality directors to the board, that couldn't be reviewed as a separate resolution to council. But I think, so that's the purpose of the third recommendation there, to ask the Chief Executive to establish a policy of regular CPI increase. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll just do my comment. I just think the reason why I put up number 2 was that we are behind the 8 ball in terms of director fees, so that's why I have proposed the increase to 146,000. It is less than what they have asked for, but I think as a council we've also got to watch our pennies going forward. So that's why it isn't as much as what they want. I do think we can't always give our organisations exactly what they want, and they are a very good organisation and it's a very good annual report. And as directors, they do a very good job, but we've also got other organisations that do good jobs as well. So I think 146,000 per annum is a good job, is a good amount to pay for this organisation. I think I just also need to remind councillors, we're only talking about the annual report for the airport. We're not speaking on any other documents. This is just the annual report. So we'll go to other comments. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, look, I'm happy to second all of this, and I want to hopefully emboss on the airport and to councillors that although I'm critical of the airport, I am also fair. You've performed very well this year, and I'm exceptionally impressed. You've increased your profit substantially, and it would have been easy for you to come to us and said, well, we've also had to increase our expenses substantially because due to the increased traffic numbers and passenger numbers, we've had to increase cost to pay for that. So the fact that you've managed to keep your costs in line with what you budgeted while reporting a significant increase in profit, I and I know a number of other councillors are very impressed by. So I think it would send the wrong message for us in this chamber to say, well done, you've done what we wanted and we're not going to remunerate you appropriately for that, particularly given it's based on empirical evidence, not just on opinion of what they would like. I don't think we can sit here in the chamber and say, well, we want you to bring empirical data to us of what other peers are getting, and then when we get that data put in front of us say, oh, well, we don't like it, so we're not going to do it. At the end of the day, you're either an evidence-based councillor or you're not. And a number of councillors in this chamber will say, well, you know, whether you like it or not, that's what the evidence shows. So I feel what we're proposing perhaps is even a little bit undercooked, but I moderate that with a third recommendation which Councillor Naylor's put forward. If you're negotiating a 5-year lease, what you may do is, or what a lot of leases do, is put in a CPI increase annually to that lease, so that in that 5 years that you're not renegotiating, it does keep in line with what the market's doing. And that doesn't mean that when you get to the end of that 5-year lease, you say, well, where it's at, that's where it's at no matter what. If you've gone above what the market rates are, you'll drop it down. If you're under what the market rates are, you'll put it up. And so having a CPI increase in here for directors' fees means that we may not have the large step changes that we see where we're having to go up in lumpy bits, but actually we see a more gradual increase that keeps us in line with the market. So I think it's a very sensible way of making sure that we don't end up significantly out of step with what's appropriate for the wider market for directors' fees. So this is, as Councillor Naylor's outlined, an $11,000 increase, which represents around 8%, which is not drastically out of step with what we're doing in our own organisation, and certainly, from what the data shows, isn't out of step with what is appropriate. In fact, would still be at the low end of what is appropriate for the services they provide. So very comfortable doing this. On the question of attracting talent versus retention, I would say that this isn't just about if we have to go out and attract new directors that we need to be increasing the price that we can do that. It's also about making sure that we retain the directors that we have if we believe they're performing well. And to do that, we make sure we remunerate them fairly for their performance and in line with what could reasonably be expected for the position that they hold. So I'm very comfortable with both recommendations in front of us. I just want to quickly talk about this dividend policy discussion because I'm quite confused by some of the comments from councillors. Councillor Naylor, you and I wrote the recommendation that they put in a 10% dividend in year 2 and a 20% dividend in year 3. So I'm not entirely sure where the confusion is coming from of why they're only budgeting 10%. That's what we asked them to do. And we had a discussion at the time in this chamber of should we make it 20% in year 2 and 40% in year 3, and there wasn't support in the chamber to do that. So although perhaps I might have liked to have seen a 20% and a 40% increase, that wasn't what we were able to get the numbers to agree to. So ultimately, 10 and 20 is what was agreed by the councillors here, and that's what the airport is budgeting and what they're telling us. So I'm comfortable that we made that decision in this chamber, and now they're acting upon what we asked them to do. In terms of the flexible dividend policy, we approved it. I believe there were 5 criteria or something along those lines, and I have to go back in the document to check exactly what they were, but there were around 5 criteria they were looking at that would give their recommendation for what a dividend would be. But ultimately, as the Mayor outlined in his questions, we are the shareholder and we can choose to ignore a policy if we so wanted to. We did it when we set the rates this year. We can choose to ignore policies if that was the will of council, that we felt the airport was so out of line with what they were recommending versus what we wanted. So the control does start with us. We approved these figures, approved the flexible dividend policy. So in that light, I'm quite comfortable with it. But not saying that it's off the table for discussion going forward, but just to put the, I guess, history in there, it is all decisions that we made in this chamber that we approved ourselves. So, look, overall to the airport, good performance, great to see an uptick in passenger numbers and an uptick in profit, good work on keeping your expenses under control. I appreciate some of that is due to deferred expenses to next year, so we may see a jump in next year's expenses, but look, happy with the performance and happy to bring remuneration in line with what the data would show is appropriate. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Johnson.
Well, thanks, Madam Chair. I was wondering how long Councillor Wood was going to be speaking for a minute. I mean, I do have some concerns about where we're at in terms of the dividend going forward. And that is nothing to do with what was agreed previously, around 10%, and it's got nothing to do with the flexible or dividend policy per se. But what it is to do is the fact that the airport has performed exceptionally well. I think that's one thing we are all agreed on. And the profit is much more than was predicted. And consequently, I think it's very unfortunate if ratepayers don't get the direct benefit of that. So my understanding of where Councillor Naylor was coming from, perhaps others who have indicated concern with that, is that flexibility cuts both ways. Whilst we accept flexibility in terms of where the airport might need to put the dividend, also there needs to be flexibility back where there is an exceptionally well-performing year, that the dividend percentage might be increased. And I do want to, since the airport were very clear about how their outlook influences their decision making, I do want to be really clear about our outlook in this chamber. We're coming into a long-term plan. We're going to find ourselves absolutely under pressure in terms of what is affordable for our city over the next 10 years. We're going to be making some really tough calls about what we can afford to do and what we can't afford to do. And we need to look at every avenue and turn up every stone to see where there might be additional funding. And when we hear that the airport has done very well, and I genuinely congratulate them on that, it is a good performance, I do think that a return of the dividend to a higher percentage sooner than was anticipated might be something that could be genuinely considered. And I would encourage the airport board to consider that and to, as I think they said, take on board the shareholder views. Because we as the shareholder are in a very, very tough spot going forward over the next 10 years. We're going to be in a very tough spot, particularly with some of the things that are now in our wheelhouse to pay for that perhaps might not have been. So I just want to raise that because I think it's important context for the board to be aware of, and I'll leave the discussion on where it should sit at that. And one of the comments that we often get from some people around the table is, oh, well, you know, you just don't understand economics. Well, that may be so, but I do understand what my responsibility is as an elected member, and that is to make sure that we're giving good value to ratepayers. And I do know that dollar for dollar, a dividend from the airport reduces the amount of rates that our ratepayers have to pay. So let's keep that in the top of our minds. In terms of the director remuneration, I'm not going to be supporting that increase. And the reason is that there was a very large increase made, given the argument that the board needed an extra board member. And when that board member dropped out, there was no reduction. The total pool was divided amongst the remaining board members. And so I see no reason for an increase of that quantity this year. And finally, I will support number 3 because I also think that it's a little difficult to be faced every year with the prospect of trying to decide what is the correct pay level for the board members. And linking it to CPI, I think, would be a reasonable option. So that's where I'm at. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just really briefly on the recommendations in front of us. I'm broadly happy with all 3. Having heard the debate around the increase to the remuneration, I can see the justification for that. Having heard Councillor Johnson though signal that there's an alternate view, I'd just note that if number 2 fails, we might want to move the alternate recommendation, which is to leave the remuneration unchanged, and expect that will be taken separately. On the first substantive recommendation that we received, the annual report, I do want to thank the airport board for, what I think we're all agreed has been an excellent year and surprisingly good passenger numbers and profitability. That is great news for our community, great news for our city, great news for the region, because the airport does function as that gateway, and I really liked how that came across in the video. I wanted to particularly talk about the very controversial sponsorship budgets, because I'm actually very glad that the airport uses their marketing budget in a way that gives benefit to our community. It will be a very easy thing to spend a marketing budget on advertising in newspapers or magazines or all kinds of other creative ideas that don't provide a benefit to our community. And the way they approach it through sponsorship actually does take that investment and pay it to our community. I'm sure that that budget wouldn't reduce if they weren't doing sponsorship. It would just get spent in a different way, and at least this way our community benefits, sometimes financially, but in other untangible ways as well. And I'd note particularly their support for Dragfest this year, which was a small financial contribution, but more importantly, a contribution of manaakitanga and welcoming to our city, which I know our visitors, some performers, some attendees, felt as they arrived in the airport. And our performers particularly enjoyed the use of the valet parking shed. Thank you for that. It meant we didn't unload the vast quantities of luggage in the rain, which was really good news for me. Is that just a Dragfest announcement? No? Just a test. Excellent. So thank you for that. You are a gateway to our city. You are an experience that people receive as they arrive here, and that goes a long way to setting them up for a good experience of our city. It's valuable in more ways than just your financial contribution. So thank you. I'll be supporting all three.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just wanted to comment on a couple aspects. One, in terms of the airport's overall performance for the year, and you've had a number of accolades in a number of areas already, but particularly wanted to recognize the progress in the sustainability journey that was highlighted, in particular how much of that landed this year. And that's work that has been in progress for a number of years, and be pleased with how that's going. As you will have heard from my questions, very interested around the new build and ensuring that environmental sustainability sits at the core of that building, as well as a number of other functions as well, and was heartened to hear that there's a intention to be working with the New Zealand Green Building Council in that regard. On the sustainability front, need to acknowledge that there is also an irony in that growing passenger numbers directly relates to growing emissions in the current technology that we operate with. So I was very pleased to hear that we have an expression of interest for the low emissions aircraft trial, and I very much hope that that lands here, let's say, and that Air New Zealand has that opportunity to work with us and some of the infrastructure that we're putting in place around renewables. Also wanted to comment briefly around the remuneration, and just to ensure that elected members see that it's an evidence-based approach. I thought I'd share some numbers as well. We got some track record on the remuneration increase for directors over time, and since 2016 we've seen that increase go up by 76% already. When you compare that to where household earnings have gone over that time, it's at 42%. When you compare it to inflation over that time, it's 29%. So there is some evidence here, and the evidence that I'm working from suggests that directors' remuneration is becoming increasingly disconnected from the real economy and the real day-to-day life that people in this community are facing. And at this point, I'm very uncomfortable loading additional remuneration, therefore additional cost on the community, given that the track record of increase to directors' fees has outstripped inflation by nearly 2 to 1. So I'm quite comfortable with where it's at, and so I won't be supporting number 2, but am happy to support number 1, and would thank Councillors Naylor and Wood for bringing us number 3, because I think all of us at some level find debating directors' remuneration in this way, in the absence of any policy, to be a little bit fraught. So be looking forward to supporting that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Finally, the Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, excuse me, I think we're getting a clear understanding who supports the airport and perhaps who's a little bit on the fence. I, for one, support them, and I just want to acknowledge them for the good work that they've done. It's been very difficult in this industry, in this sector. And I'll just remind some councillors, during COVID, quite a few airlines went out of business. Some airports went broke, mainly overseas, but that was very, very tough on the sector. Our airport company have, in the last year, our total assets, 107 million. We've paid down over $3 million of debt. We've got equity of 84 million. and they've produced a surplus of 2.9 million. So the financials are very, very strong. And I will support all three, and I just want to put a bit of context to some of them. I appreciate that some of our colleagues around the dividend and the ratepayer not getting that back. But actually, if you think about what the company needs to do and the equity and debt ratios and the ongoing exposure of the company, which I thought the chair explained very well to some questions. And yes, simply they can pay a dividend. They can. But they'll be back at us to borrow or fund that in some other way. Because very, very simply, and they've explained to us, and it's really unfortunate that a terminal rebuild is right on top of a couple of other things they're trying to do as I diversify. We know they want to do more around freight. We've got flight training and also the non-aeronautical revenue streams. But the terminal, we just don't operate without a terminal. We have to do it. We can't get out of it. It's unfortunate. And it's unfortunate it's a total rebuild. And I did say to the manager and some of the directors that Missoula, our sister city, is exactly in the same position where they're rebuilding a terminal on a demolished site. So there may be some synergies or some shared learnings there that our two sister cities could share. But look, this is their biggest capital spend program in generations. And it's an unusual year, and I think there needs to be some compromise around the table as well. I too want to get back to a full dividend. I totally agree with some of the councillors' comments around, it does come back to the ratepayers, and we are the shareholder. We do have some difficult times coming up. I appreciate they're all very, very valid comments. But we've also got to understand if we kneecap a company which we are 100% owner of, are we just robbing Peter to pay Paul? So I think we've sent a signal to the airport company that we would like the dividends repaid quicker, perhaps even from the approved policy that we all agreed, well, not all of us, but most of us agreed to, and that we still give them support to carry out the work they've got to do. They're an arm's length board. We employ people to make good decisions. They've had a good year. I think we've got to try and support them. So I'm supportive of all three recommendations. Thank you, Chair.
Right, thank you for that. What we're going to do is take each recommendation separately. So we'll look at recommendation number 1 and we'll vote on that. And that's passed 14 votes for with none against. We'll look at recommendation number 2, and as Councillor Bowen quite rightly said, if it fails, we will look to an alternative. Thank you, but we'll worry about that in a minute. So recommendation number 2, we'll look to vote for that, please. And that's passed 10 votes for and 4 against. Thank you, everyone. And we'll look to recommendation number 3. We're just waiting because everyone's going to have a quick look. Recommendation number 3 about the CPI, and we're now voting. And that's 14 votes for with none against. Right, we're now going to go to item number 16, which is page 209. Sorry for those in the hurry. You're going to be back on the 1st of November. Okay, so we go to this item. I'll hand over to, thank you guys. Hand over to our Chief Planning Officer.
Very good. Thank you, Madam Chair. Nothing specific to add, just to note that that item that was discussed earlier regarding Puriri Terrace will be added to the work schedule, and there's a couple of 3 items that would typically come to this committee that are going to the 6th of December council meeting instead, given that this is the last meeting for the year.
And Councillor Bowen's also got a new recommendation to add to this committee.
Yes, please. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for seconding. I would like to add to the Economic Growth Committee work schedule a request for the CE to provide a report, which I'm hoping the words have come through because I've handed it down, for an annual summary report on the economic impact or benefits of the events funded by council for their economic impact. I know that seems like a rather convoluted way of explaining it, but my thinking here is that we often receive the economic impact assessment from various events. Groups like Rural Games come and present it to us. I feel like this information is available in council, but we don't have a place where those things are brought together and compared. So by events funded by PNCC, I'm imagining major events, the line items that have come out of major events that are now funded separately, the secondary school sports events, which we fund for their economic impact, and there will also be some art events that come in the arts events fund that have an economic impact element. So I'm just seeking one report that brings the economic impact assessment of that to this committee. Thank you.
Are you happy to second?
Happy to move both, yes.
Yes, thank you, and I'll second it. Thank you for that. Any comments? Question? Okay, yes, question, Councillor Ward.
Sorry, just very quickly, I just wanted to ask a question of the mover if she envisaged this would be in place of the economic impact reports that would come through on an event-by-event basis, or would this be complementing and bringing it? Like, would we still see them come through regularly?
I'll ask the officer there, because Councillor Bowen won't know.
I think that question might be best answered by the unit manager, Chief Executive Unit.
Did you get the question, Donna?
Yes, as I understand it, the question was whether the separate economic reports that come in with the events would continue to come. It's actually council can make that request to us. At the moment, they are part of the report that comes to you, and I would expect that that would continue unless you require just one report to replace them.
Yep, that's great. Thank you, Donna. Happy? Any comments on this? So we're happy to vote. Thank you. That's passed, 14 votes for and none against. No. So thank you for that. So items 12, 13, 14, 15 and 16 will all be moved to the first of the 11th meeting, which is the council meeting, because we don't have any more time for it today, and we have to be finished by 12 o'clock for the council meeting, which is in about 5 minutes' time. So thank you very much, everybody. I'll hand over to the Deputy Mayor to close this meeting. Thank you very much, everyone, for all your resilience.
Tēnā koe, Madam Chair, o tira tēnā tātou. I'll conclude with the karakia whakarongo ake au. Whakarongo ake au ki te tangi a te manu a te mātui. Tui, 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 tui a. Tui a i runga, tui a i raro, tui a i roto, tui a i waho, tui a ki te here tangata. Ka rongo te pō, ka rongo te ao, tūturu whakamaua kia tīna.